Hello, everyone. Hello to the last Wednesday of Science. We understand that we have a little issue with times. Of course, we are now going into spring, so we forgot that times are changing. So thank you for all of you, even though this was a little last minute change. And of course, also thank you so much for joining, even though we postponed the session, and that's mean like you are really interested in our Wednesday of Science. And today we are very delighted to have the last session. We have initially our colleague Nicholas from the science team presenting on the STAR metric. 2 weeks ago, we also have our colleagues Marcos Valderrábano presenting on the red list of ecosystem, but it's not only about ecosystem, it's not only about the species, it's also about the co-benefit of nature and conservation. And today we have our colleague Leander Rice, who will be talking a little bit more on ecosystem services, provision, and so on. So, but before, I would like to give you some housekeeping rules to also to ace your enjoyment of this session. So please, Rosa, if you could share the screen. In the session, of course, you always have the possibility to comment, react, or even share any link to any resources you may have from your project and other initiatives that you know about it. And of course, you can post your questions. You have two choices. You can use whether it's the chat option, or if you would like to prefer to use the Q&A question. We will be responding to those. And if not possible to respond during the session, we can always come back to you. For the non-English speakers, please, you can use also the interpretation option using the channel, whether it's English or French in this case. And like always, the recording, the slides will be shared after the webinar, both in French and in English. So for colleagues who are not able to join us today, then we'll be able to watch again the session. And before we go with Leander's presentation, I would like just to make a note on what is NAbSA. Is our practice to always remember who we are. So the NAbSA project is a project which is supporting the Partnering for Climate portfolio funded by Global Affairs Canada, a portfolio of 19 projects. And our support is targeting three major pillars. First is on capacity building and technical assistance. Today we are sharing on the work on natural capital accounting and ecosystem services. So this is one of the capacity building strength, let's say not capacity building, but rather capacity strengthening that we are proposing to the whole community of practice. But then, of course, we also have documenting the stories and lessons and best practices. There is amazing work happening on the ground. So this is also an opportunity to leverage on the work which is happening. You will have news in this sense. In June, we will be hosting, together with other initiatives, IUCN initiatives, a gender symposium on climate and nature. So stay tuned because we will be sharing more information in this regard. And finally, we have the capacities, we have the lessons learned, we have the evidence on the ground to be able to influence policy and exchange with other community of practices. So this is NASA, this is how we are. My colleague Rose in the line. Unfortunately, our colleague Zoe, she's not in with us today, and myself, we are the core of the NAbSA team. And next slide, please. And with this little introduction about the NAbSA project, I would like to hand over to our colleague Leander Rice, who is senior economist in IUCN's team on economy and finance, and he will be the one taking over this session for the next 40 minutes. So Leander, over to you.
Thanks, Veronica. So hi, everyone. Quickly sharing my screen. Okay, so that should now be okay, right? So my name is Leander Reis, and I will be presenting two parts of work. The first part is actually work that has been developed by Juha Sikamaki, which is IUCN's chief economist, in collaboration with Mattias Biagio, who was an economist at IUCN and is now a senior economist with the World Bank. And then also work that I have developed together with Guillermo Putzais, who is a spatial data analyst in our regional office in Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean. So I will start the presentation by doing a quick introduction in natural capital accounting. Then I will present the work that is being led by Juha Sikamaki about how can you use natural capital accounting to measure the outcomes of nature-based solutions. And then I will dig in a little bit deeper into specifically how we've been measuring ecosystem service provision under climate change scenarios, and then how in the future we can also use this for prioritizing specific nature-based solutions, actions, or areas where to implement these specific actions. So I will not go into a lot of detail on natural capital accounting, just a brief presentation of what we're talking about now. So this builds on what is called the system of environmental economic accounting, specifically ecosystem accounts, which is a system to measure natural capital over time, developed originally for countries, and many countries are developing what are called these ecosystem accounts, but then also adaptable, for example, to the level of a watershed, etc. And that's part of the work that I will be showing. The main focus of the natural capital accounts is 5 types of accounts. You have an ecosystem extent account, which tries to measure different ecosystems. Then you have the ecosystem condition accounts, which measure the condition of each of the ecosystems. Then you have the ecosystem services flows. And these 3 accounts together are biophysical accounts. And then the next 2 accounts, the ecosystem service flows again, is then the monetary translation of these ecosystem service flows. And then the final account, monetary ecosystem assets, which then looks at the stock of ecosystem services. So specifically here, what we will be looking at is first ecosystem extent, which is a global proposal to measure different ecosystems in the area of interest. Although you can use local land cover or national land cover maps, we do try to link it with the IUCN global ecosystem typology to connect it with a global standard. The next one, then, for each of the ecosystems for which you are developing accounts, is you will look at ecosystem condition accounts, which really try to capture the health, the condition of each of these ecosystems. And it consists of 6 types of condition classes. You have a physical state, a chemical state, compositional state, structural state, functional state, and landscape, seascape characteristics. And for each of these classes, what we then think of is what are key indicators that can help us to measure the overall condition of each ecosystem. And of course, based on the condition of an ecosystem, a specific ecosystem then will have capacities, larger or smaller capacities to provide ecosystem services, right? Where first we think about this from a provision of ecosystem services done by different types of ecosystems. But then, of course, that also links with actual benefits of these ecosystem services. And so this is a very brief overview of the ecosystem accounts. So this work, and specifically then the CAEA, has then been used to develop a framework as developed by Juha Sikamaki, Mattias Biagio, and then the specific case study that I will briefly show, also in collaboration with Guillermo Putzais, where the idea was, how can we use natural capital accounting then to measure the outcomes of nature-based solution? For this, they developed a framework which has been published in this publication, but then also specifically tried to test it, pilot it in a project that IUCN implemented in the past in the La Chua region of Guatemala in collaboration with the Fundación La Chua, which is a local NGO. And what they did there is that they implemented cocoa agroforestry in degraded areas. And so they implemented this forest landscape restoration action to make sure increase the provision of ecosystem services, and of course also assuring livelihood for the local communities. And so what Sikamaki and colleagues then did was to develop and look at how we can develop these extent accounts. So thinking about what type of land uses do you have. Typically, what you do in accounting is you always will have an opening account, know what is the starting point that you're looking at, and then you will have a closing account as well to really track how land uses changes over time. You can think about this also for other nature-based solutions, if they include specifically restoration or protection, etc. So this is the first thing that you want to capture. Then they also looked at the condition, of course, of all these ecosystems. This is a specific example where what you want to do when you look at the condition of an ecosystem, of course, is first develop all your variables. But in order to really understand how you go, what the condition of an ecosystem is, you link these variables then with what we call reference levels, where you always will have an upper and a lower level. And it's the relation between your variable and how it changes and the upper and lower level that will allow you to have an indicator value. And then finally, they also measured the ecosystem services. They looked at provisioning, climate regulation, soil erosion for different types of ecosystems, and both physically and then also in monetary value. And then also, of course, try to compare then what is before the nature-based solutions was implemented and then afterwards. So this is the overall framing that we think about when you want to look, for example, at a specific area, is what is the current state of the area? In this case, this was done after, but of course, it can also be done to really think about the design of nature-based solutions, where you think, okay, if I change a specific area, how will that affect the condition of each of these ecosystems? And then, of course, how will that also then have an impact on ecosystem service provision, be it completely physical, or then, of course, also thinking about this from a monetary perspective. And so this is in part what we did in this case, specifically some work that I developed together with our colleague Guillermo Putzes, which is where we tried to look at the provision of ecosystem services, but then considering different climate change scenarios. So we did this work for a project that is led by our regional office for Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean called ORMAC, who are implementing a project in the Altiplano of Guatemala, so the Guatemalan highlands, where they are looking, among other things, at restoring landscapes to assure that there is a stronger adaptation against the changing climate. So the total area of the project is around 147,000 hectares and includes, among other actions, the use of incentives and small and medium-sized grants to community-based organizations for the restoration of specific areas of land. When we did this first exercise, around 4,300 hectares had been restored, and that's what I will be presenting. But until now, I think the project is already restoring or has restored around 10,000 hectares of land. The restoration actions are quite diverse. It includes forest plantations. There is then agroforestry systems, whether it's with perennial crops, mainly coffee, or agroforestry systems with annual crops, which is mainly maize and bean systems that then get integrated with trees. Then there is also the management of natural forests for productive purposes or for protection. And then there is also reforestation. So what the map shows here is that where these specific actions have been implemented, which for the analysis that I will be presenting is around 3% of the total area. So what the question then became is, how can we showcase that this restoration has an impact on overall on the adaptive capacities of the region? And for this, what we then said is we modeled the ecosystem services, not just looking at the current provision, but really trying to see how they will potentially change under climate change. And for this, we use a software called Invest, which is an open source software developed by the Natural Capital Project. And where basically now we have, the question is, on the one hand, is how is current ecosystem service provision, we call the baseline scenario, how under a changing climate would this ecosystem service provision shift if we do not implement restoration actions? And then compare that with how is the provision of ecosystem services when we consider the restoration. And so we can basically look at the difference there to understand the actual impact for ecosystem-based adaptation, not just looking at ecosystem service provision, but specifically considering future climate change. So a first ecosystem service that we modeled is what we call a sediment delivery ratio. So we modeled erosion and we modeled sediment export. So basically what the model does is it calculates for each unit of area, so a pixel in spatial analysis, the amount of erosion and then the retention capacities, and will calculate then how much sediments flow from pixel to pixel until they end up in a river or stream. The model does not calculate then how that sedimentation is affecting the river or how the river takes it somewhere else. So once it's calculated that a specific sediment ends up in the river, then the model stops. Here I will mostly present the erosion, but of course the relation between erosion and sediment export is that part of the eroded sediments will then be exported towards the river, so the results are comparable in that sense. So we use spatial data. This is a spatial model where we look at land uses. We did the analysis at the sub-watershed level. Then, of course, also slopes are very important, for which we use a digital elevation model to really understand this. Then we also consider the soil erodibility, or the K factor, and then soil rainfall erosivity, or the R factor, which measures then the impact of rain on erosion. We're considering the amount of rain, but also the strength of the raindrops, etc. And then we also consider the cover factor, so how much of the land is covered by specific types of crops or trees, etc. And then whether specifically in the managed areas, specific anti-erosion practices have been implemented. For climate change, we then used the data that were developed by the GRC. So they developed climate change predictions for rainfall erosivity using different representative concentration pathways models. And so this is what you see here. Is we use the data then to understand how through climate change, rainfall erosivity will change in 2030 and in 2050, and then considering these three climate change models. And so these data were developed by the GRC. And so this is what we could then use in addition to considering how restoration changes the land cover, how specific practices then changes what we call the P factor that affects erosion, but then we could also really understand and look at rainfall erosivity, and so the impact of climate change on rainfall erosivity. So basically what we then do is first develop a baseline. This is what you see in these two maps. So the first one is the erosion rate baseline, and the map that is next to it is the sediment export rate baseline. So these ones are based on the historical data and the land cover maps before erosion was implemented. Then what we do then to try to understand how climate change in the future will impact and how potentially restoration can reduce or increase the impact is to develop different scenarios. So first we run the model again, considering no restoration, so basically the same land covers as for the baseline, but then considering the different rainfall erosivities as predicted under different climate change scenarios. And then we run the model again, considering then the restoration on around 3% of the land area. And so this already gives us a first indication. Of course, what you basically see here is that the mean erosion under restoration is 6.66 tons, whereas then the mean erosion without restoration is 6.77. Of course, this slight difference is because the overall, it's only 3% of the area that was restored. That's also what you can see in the graph, that it's very difficult to really visually observe the impact of restoration, although there is a clear difference. And so this is what you see here then in this graph. What you see on your left side of the screen is the estimated mean erosion potential 2030, with then both business as usual, so using the no changes in land cover, and then under erosion. And then on the right side in the darker blue, what you see is then the predicted mean erosion potential by 2050. And although the changes are small for the total area, it is clear that they are different. There is no overlap between the estimated mean erosion potential under the baseline scenario versus the restoration. Then, of course, if you want to understand this more specifically, especially as we've only been measuring restoration for 3% of the total area, is look at it much more specifically at the sub-watershed level, because not all areas, not all watersheds have been restored to the same level. And they really try to understand, okay, where are the changes the largest? And is that, and of course, linked to the implementation of restoration actions. So what you see in this graph is then the first, that is the estimated impact of climate change on erosion potential. And so here what we compare is the baseline scenario with the climate change scenario without restoration. You can see that depending on the watershed, the erosion will have a very large increase versus a very small increase. This is due to two factors. One is the size of the sub-watersheds, as they do not all have the same size. And the other one is then, of course, land cover, where, for example, forests have lower erosion rates than if you plant annual crops. This is then the same for the average. So here it's the tons per hectare versus the previous graph, which was the total tons. So this already highlights a little bit the impact of climate change on soil erosion as estimated with this model. And then, of course, what we're really interested in is how restoration then has affected this reduction or potential reduction in soil erosion. And that's what you can see here. So this is the total reduction for each of the watersheds. Some watersheds, especially that are on the bottom of the graph, have no change in erosion. That's because these were areas where actually no restoration actions had taken place at the moment of this assessment. And then we can also look at the average erosion reduction, so the tons per hectare, with some watersheds with a relatively high reduction, then some moderate reductions, and then again, of course, some where no reduction took place as no restoration actions were implemented. Now we can go even more specific, and that's of course really where we want to look at, is then not only what happens at the overall watershed or sub-watershed level, but then also really look at only the areas that have been restored. And that's what you see here. Is here we measured the erosion only on those areas where where restoration took place, to really then understand, okay, if we only look at these areas, what was the impact? And that's what you see here on these box plot graphs, where on your left side, what you see is all the pixels, so the units of area that had the erosion reduction. And then we also see that there is some places where there was actually an erosion increase. So for the erosion reduction, that's of course what we hope to get out of ecosystem-based adaptation, because reduced soil erosion will make sure that you're not losing so much soil fertility, and it also has a positive impact on water quality, as then it means that less sediments enter in the water. The ones that have an erosion increase, there is two potential reasons for that. One may be that we did not measure correctly the previous land use, because, for example, if the previous land use was stated to be a forest, and then the proposed restoration action is to manage that forest sustainably for timber, then you will have a small increase in erosion because you're slightly decreasing the amount of vegetation cover on the land. If that's the case and there is an actual increase, then of course what we have to think about is including additional measures to reduce erosion, for example, live barriers. If we have misrepresented the previous land use, which for some areas is always a slight possibility, then of course you would have to remodel it and evaluate this again. But overall, what you see is that there is an impact of the restoration actions, which is reducing soil erosion on these lands. Then the second model that we looked at is one called seasonal water yield model. This model, it helps you to understand quick flow, which is water that after precipitation flows directly to the river, and then local recharge, which tries to estimate the amount of water that infiltrates. And then we also try to estimate evapotranspiration. And so basically what it tells you is what you could call a hydrological balance, where the sum of evapotranspiration, quick flow, and local recharge is equal to the precipitation. Local recharge will help you with the amount of water that gets released over time, whereas quick flow then can potentially also be related, for example, to flooding. If a lot of water falls at the same time and the land is not capable of absorbing it, then it will create potential floods. So for this, we used not the RCP, but the shared socioeconomic pathways, because for this, we access data through WorldClim, which has the predictions for temperature and precipitation, which then again help us to estimate the impacts of climate change. So we used three different models. The SSP1 that looks at sustainability, then the middle of the road scenario, and then regional rivalry. Also to see how much the changes in ecosystem service provision are, not for a single climate scenario, but then looking at three different ones, and again for the periods 2030 to 2050. And so this is what you see here. So we used the precipitation data and then also temperature data to estimate the reference evapotranspiration, which is a model input, as well as precipitation. And then again, we also consider land use, similarly as before with the erosion estimations, how land cover changes and how that then affects the provision of ecosystem services. We also look at how the change in baseline versus climate change scenarios can potentially affect the hydrological balance in the watershed in the future. And then there is other inputs as well, such as the crop evaporation coefficient, where different types of land uses land covers have different evaporation coefficients. For example, trees tend to have a higher evaporation coefficient than an annual crop. And then we also consider, again, the elevation or the slopes, because that also has an impact on whether your water will infiltrate or will be generating a quick flow. And so this is the hydrological balance that we then estimate. So it's precipitation is what happens with it. Some of it is estimated to go into a local recharge. Some of it is evaporation. And then some of it is quick flow. This is just one example of the, in total, 6 different results that we have, 2030, 2050, for 3 climate change scenarios. And this is what you can observe for the overall watershed. So the first thing that is clear is under the climate change scenarios, as compared to the baseline, is a significant increase in the evaporation because of the increase in temperature. Then there is, of course, based on that, then a reduction specifically in local recharge and a much smaller change in quick flow, which also has to do with how this model is developed. Now, this is a rather simplified model to estimate ecosystem service provisions as compared to much more complex hydrological models. The InVEST models are specifically developed to estimate ecosystem service provision, not the complexities that are happening, of course, within the soil when you think about hydrology. But in general, what we see now is that under the restoration scenarios, the evaporation is slightly higher than under the baseline. The quick flow is slower, but then also the local recharge. And that is, of course, due to the fact that trees have a higher evaporation rate than, for example, as I mentioned before, annual crops or grasslands. And so the increase in evapotranspiration translates to a decrease in local recharge. What the model cannot capture is how, for example, then trees may capture that evaporation in their leaves, and it may then actually fall on the ground at the later stage. No, it may retain much more humidity. Whereas what it can also then do, of course, is that if you have a higher terrestrial evaporation, instead of having the water flow in a river, is that you will potentially generate more rain. Whereas restoration actions, by their reduction in soil erosion, may also strengthen the capacity of soils to retain water. But this is not measured by this model. What it does say now is that when restoring actions, it's really important to consider not only the strength of trees, but also, for example, how potentially it may change crop evaporation. And then, of course, the fact that no matter how we look at this now, is that the increase in temperature, in order to offset this significantly, will need more than planting trees on 3% of the area. And of course, now we will hope to redo this assessment looking at the larger state. Then, of course, because these models are also, of course, sensitive to the input, we did look at the sensitivity to the model if we comparing the crop evaporation rates that we used, which we took from literature, and then also thinking how will the model look if we reduce the crop evaporation coefficients for all the land covers, be they restored or not restored, and then also look at this from an increase perspective. And what you see then, that does have a significant impact on the evaporation rate. No, the higher your crop evaporation coefficient is, the higher, of course, your evaporation, and then the lower your local recharge, versus the lower your crop evaporation rate is, the lower that your evaporation will be. But overall, in general, it doesn't change the overall difference between the restoration actions under climate change versus the business as usual, where no land cover changes are considered. So this is then, of course, information. In this case, we used it to understand a project after it had been implemented. But the next step is to really look at ecosystems and use natural capital accounting also for the design, where first you need to understand the extent of the different land covers, ecosystem types that you have in the area where you're interested in implementing a nature-based solution. Then, of course, the current condition and how, through a proposed nature-based solution, you want to change that condition, so that specifically you can then try to understand what type of ecosystem services am I interested in, what is the estimated potential impact if I implement them, and then also which areas potentially have the highest impact if I cannot implement this because of different reasons, whether they're resources or whether some of the area is populated or used for crop production, etc., that you cannot implement the proposed nature-based solution on the whole area. And so I will briefly show a last example on this. So this is how we use ecosystem service provision for the prioritization of actions and areas. This work, which was done by me and our colleague Guillermo Putzés, does not include climate change scenarios, but the proposal is the same. Basically, and this is an example that we did in Belize to support the National Restoration Opportunity Assessment that was done in Belize, is first, we can think about the impact potential maps, which are the maps that I showed where you look at the difference between, for example, erosion with and without restoration, only on the areas where you are considering you will implement a specific action. We call these impact potential maps. In this case, what is shown is two examples of impact potential maps for restoration inside protected areas and then reforestation outside of protected areas, because there is a difference in what you can do inside or outside protected areas. And then, of course, the current state of land uses in Belize, inside or outside protected areas, is different. So this already tells us where we will have the highest estimated impact on, in this case, quick flow, if we restore. And so we can already think then, okay, these are areas that are critical for, in this case, reduction of quick flow. But in addition, as we're not only interested in the pure biophysical provision of ecosystem services, we are also, of course, interested in where is the highest potential demand for this ecosystem service. So we try to link the impact potential maps of ecosystem service provision with beneficiary maps. And in this case, this is a map for Belize that shows where you have the highest flood risk linked with population density. And so if we overlap these maps through a multi-criteria analysis, what we can see is where will we have the highest reduction in quick flow through restoration, but in areas where there is a high flood risk and population density. And so this can then really help us to prioritize in which areas we would need to think about restoring first if our aim is to reduce quick flow. Then another example, this is similar to the erosion reduction potential maps that I showed before. So this tells for very specific actions where you will have a reduction in erosion. So for example, it shows the reduction in erosion if you implement silvopastoral systems. So if you plant trees on grassland for the production of cattle. Then it also, the other map shows the estimated impact potential in erosion reduction if you change the management of sugarcane. And so we have these impact potential maps then for all the different types of restoration actions that we think about. And then the question is, where do you want to reduce erosion the most? And in the case of Belize, it was then linked with the soil fertility indicator, where you want to reduce your erosion the most in your most fertile soils. And then again, through spatial multi-criteria analysis, you can then identify which actions are priorities and also which areas. And so this is similar approach then that can be considered when thinking about designing and not only measuring the impact of specific nature-based solutions under different climate change scenarios, to really think which actions have the highest impact, positive impact on the ecosystem services that I want to ensure, and then also which areas will have the highest impact if I implement these given actions. This is a national example, but of course this can be done on a lower area as well, as I showed with the example of Guatemala. And so that is, in sum, a little bit the work that I wanted to share with you is how we use ecosystem service provision to really understand the impact of specific actions. And then, of course, also to really think about how we can use these models then to really think about the design and implementation of nature-based solutions. So thank you.
Alba, thank you to you, Leander. This was a extremely interesting presentation. I could go for 2 more hours for questions, but I won't do that to you. I will not sure if there is any question in the chat. I know usually that colleagues are a little bit shy with questions, but definitely for any of you, please, you can post your questions in the chat or in the Q&A box, or just feel free to raise your hand. But in the meantime, a matter of breaking the ice, I would like to start with a couple of questions, Leander, and it's a little bit also in the context of the Partnering for Climate, which is the initiative that Global Affairs Canada is financing, and that's why today we are all here. Because this Partnering for Climate initiative has a strong, not that strong, the objective is to reduce poverty in Sub-Saharan Africa. So I really like the fact that you have the case studies you have been showcasing in terms of what are the beneficiaries. But in this case, last case, it was more about flooding and erosion. So is there any way that it could be also a connection on how to reflect through this kind of analysis, how we could achieve a decrease in poverty?
Definitely. And actually, I mean, I didn't show this because, of course, I really wanted to present the natural capital aspect of this. No, but for example, in Belize, we also use job creation and then differences in unemployment rates to think about how different, in this case, restoration actions can or will not create employment, whether that employment is short term or long term. No, because you may need additional labor to plant trees, but then how much labor do you need to maintain them? So that's a link that we made. Then, of course, it's still linked with ecosystem service provision. Or if you think about soil erosion and then the importance of crops. In addition to that, often it's the most vulnerable communities that live in the most vulnerable places. So, of course, if you think about it from that perspective, it's not then about necessarily directly reducing poverty, but at least reducing vulnerability. Right. So you can include these different angles. No. And then, of course, when you think about this from a nature-based solution perspective, is then also really think not just about the costs and the ecosystem service benefits, but then also think about potential additional benefits. No, is there? Can we think about revenue generation? And that's, of course, why a lot of the actions that we presented, they are not only about restoring and protecting natural ecosystems, which is, of course, important, but we also think, for example, now about agroforestry systems, etc., because, of course, where local communities in Guatemala, for example, are currently planting maize and beans, we cannot propose to stop producing maize and beans, but want to make the system stronger by proposing agroforestry systems, which can potentially generate additional revenue, not depending on the type of trees that you choose, and then may also make the crop production system more stable.
Yeah, thanks so much, and thanks, Leander, also because it's sort of a link with my next question too. Now that you are bringing out of agroforestry and supply chains and etc., because also as part of the Partnering for Climate, we do have different type of projects, right? Co-benefit is always part of all the projects. Like it's not only about reducing poverty or ecosystem restoration or how we are enhancing ecological functionalities, but also in terms of other type of projects. And we have a cluster of projects working more in farming and agriculture. And I see one of our colleagues from the Farm Radio project, she's online. So maybe if you would like to raise your hand. Linking the fact of working in a specific sector, let's bear in mind, for example, farming and the example you have given about Guatemala. Through this analysis that you have been conducting, Leander, it has been a direct impact or into when it comes to policy, or have you been able to inform policies through this analysis that you have been sharing with us?
So the GCF project is, of course, already it's being implemented and in collaboration with the government of Guatemala. So, of course, there the biggest, I think, policy change was the implementation of the project as such, no? Where, of course, in the future, we do hope then to strengthen this type of work by strengthening the consideration in the design phase, whereas then the restoration opportunity assessments that was done in Belize was because it relates to then at the time a specific pledge done by the government of Belize as part of the bond challenge to restore part of the lands. No, so the analysis were then used in Belize to propose restoration actions, also then to inform new projects, but then with specific restoration actually happening, not only the analysis. Similarly, as was done before in, for example, El Salvador and Honduras, and then as other colleagues have been done in Rwanda, Madagascar, Tanzania, etc., all over the world. So definitely, but often then, of course, we may also just react to a specific policy and strengthen the implementation.
Mm-hmm. That's really, you're bringing a lot of information into the table, and I think this, yeah, as you say, like this is also coming from the willingness of the countries, no? And they are willing to put this in place and to pilot test. And maybe the result will be negative or it will be positive, but the willingness is already there. And many champion countries through the bond challenge, but also countries that are championing other strategies. And this is very positive. Now it's like countries, they want to put it in place, they want to pilot test, but I believe, I don't know if for your personal experience you have faced any challenge. If not, also if you may be aware, like what is the major challenge for sort of further fostering the implementation of natural capital accounting at the national level?
Well, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be at the national level, of course, no, because as you could see, for the example, in Guatemala, it can be implemented at the much lower scale as well. I guess, I mean, at the national level, the biggest challenge, of course, is that you need government capacity, no? There is an increasing number of countries that are implementing the CAEA, including Guatemala and Costa Rica, Rwanda, many countries in the European Union. I don't know them all by heart, no, but either supported through, for example, project by IUCN, projects by the World Bank, etc., no? Or in the case of the European Union, by a lot of work done by the Joint Research Center. But I think in that case, the challenge is, of course, is always the same. No, you need the capacity. In this case, no, it's related to national statistics. And so you need the capacity and then, of course, also the resources, no? Because, yeah, if you develop these accounts, there is a lot of benefits to it, but you do need then dedicated resources in order, for people to not only collect data, but to continuously update these data, no? Because the idea of natural capital accounting is not to measure something in a specific point in time, but then really look at it over time, not to really track progress. So yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge, no? But that's also why you have organizations that try to support countries in order to address this. And then, of course, at the lower level, it's a similar idea, no? Where if you have national natural capital accounting, then of course really thinking about this at the more local level is easier because you already have access potentially then to national level data, no? Especially if they are very detailed, and to really think about, okay, what is the current state of for example, of specific condition of ecosystems. How can we think about this then from a climate change perspective? And how can that help us to design specific nature-based solutions to address these climate risks?
Thanks, Leander. I'm monitoring the questions. There is no question, so I'm making use of this time that I never had this time to to discuss also with Leander in such interesting topics. So please feel free to post your questions, and I'm coming one to the other because you are making a good linkages to the questions. You just mentioned about the capacities in terms of data and static services. So sometimes it happens that in an ideal situation, you will have all the data available. I think it's like the top situation where all the information is available and your model will be up and running.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, in some cases, this information is not available. So how you ensure accuracy, Leander, when estimating ecosystem services provision under different climate scenarios if this information is not available and not all?
So I think this question is more for a spatial data analyst than for me, no, because I work, of course, together with spatial data analysts. No, I think, of course, there is an increasing amount of information available at the global level, right? So different types of databases with an ever increasing, I think, level of accuracy. It's not always there. No, for example, in the case of the we used global data for rainfall erosivity. That's a global map that was developed. So it's not specific for Guatemala. It's, of course, also based on global climate change models, etc. No? So there is a link between, on the one hand, you can only work with the best information that you have. And then it's about interpretation. No? In this case, specifically when you think about the implementation of nature-based solutions at a local scale, then of course you don't just only use maps, but then of course we need local validation as well, no, in terms of understanding these maps, no, whether then you implement participatory mapping or just really try then, like in how far, for example, if the latest land cover map that you have available was from 2020 and the areas of measurement are 1 hectare, but you are actually working with small farmers who may have half a hectare, then this will only provide so much of the information. No? That's why then local validation and working at the local level is key in order to have these data. No, these global data, they can still, they can still have a support, right? It's still interesting to see, but that's what you need then, no?
Fully agree with you, and I think this is reflecting the reality. I can think about two projects that are part of the community of practice that they already even present already on the work they are doing on local validation and participatory mapping. Femme Pro Forêt, cannot see any colleagues from that team, and then also the colleagues from Fund Ready also, they are doing this work and then going step further at the policy level. And finally, we have one question that is never too late. I don't know if our colleague Naomi, you would like to open your mic, please, and address your question directly? Thank you, Naomi.
Oh, thank you so much, Veronica, for the floor, and thank you so much, Leander, for the great presentation. It's really beautiful to see how we can integrate the science, for the planning and for decision-making processes, and also for the community engagement. Maybe before I ask my question, I would like to also say something about the question that has been raised by Vero, because I was part of the team that was doing the restoration opportunity assessment methodology within Africa. And we do use, where possible, we do use the local geospatial data because those are the accurate one. But sometimes, most of the times, you don't have, they are not available and or accessible. In some countries, it's not even accessible. They're available, but not accessible. And where possible, we do use the local geospatial data. But if it is not possible, you will be relying on the global data. And it's always good to have this community participatory approach for validating the results. So my question was kind of in terms of the process of the data. I wanted to see in terms of the multi-criteria analysis that you were showcasing, if maybe there's some consideration also for the natural disasters, because those are the things that are happening without even having any control of it. in addition to the climate change that you already showed us. So that was a quick question that came into my mind. Yeah, but thank you so much.
Can give first a technical answer there. No, because indeed in Guatemala we did consider this. So basically, you have different spatial data that you use as an input, but then also some non-spatial data. For example, we have a spatial map with the predictions of rainfall under different scenarios. But what we do not have is predictions of the rainfall events. So the number of days in each month in which you have rain, which is also a model input. So for that, we used the historical data and then first just said, well, we could not find any specific predictions on that. But then, in addition to that, what we did then specifically to model quick flow is to reduce the number of rain events. So we did not change the amount of rain, but then instead of saying this amount of rain falls in 20 days, they say this amount of rain falls. I don't remember now by heart, but in 5 days. So basically, that would be the specific natural disaster that we'll be thinking of, right? Similarly, you could also reduce precipitation. But then, of course, it depends, no? Because reducing precipitation in terms of natural disaster, you can be without doing the model already know what is gonna change, right? I mean, overall, your local recharge, your quick flow is gonna decrease. But so that's where you can use these models for. No, you can think about this so by modeling extreme rainfall, just changing the amount of days in which the rain falls. I assume you could also, for example, change temperature, but that's a little bit more difficult because you don't have this specific like daily impact, no? And that's, of course, specifically for this model. Invest also has what they call urban invest, where they do have models. For example, there is one on urban stormwater retention that automatically asks you to look at, not just at the annual rainfall, but actually where you had flooding happening and the amount of rainfall that happened specifically during those floods. Similarly, in this case, I showed Invest and how we use it for, like this, annual assessment, because that's what it's based on. But of course, the model will not block if you say, well, I just want to look at this very extreme data, for example, because you have data on a specific extreme event. That's the advantage with the model and how you can think about this and what you can change specifically.
Thanks, Leander, and thanks, Naomi. I think like Leander went into the detail and responding, and thank you so much also to sharing with us that you were part also of this work with colleagues in Rwanda, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you so much, Naomi. So Leander, we have people getting more excited and then putting more questions in the chat. Never too late. I have one person who is raising her hand. Give me just 1 second, please. Otherwise, I will go by order because I can see. Check. Camila, I think you can address your question directly if you don't mind. So we keep it a little bit more interactive.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, Veronica and Leander, the presentation is really interesting and it's a really interesting topic. I don't know if my question is a little bit out of topic because I know that I'm bringing something different, but my question is about like, do you foresee an integration of different global international frameworks to like a unified system for natural capital, or like, for example, what you were talking about, environmental economic accounting? Because I see different frameworks being developed, for example, for corporate or enterprises, such as like the science-based targets for nature. And I know that it's a different thing because your model is more like geo-based and it's a little bit more complex than, for example, the framework for enterprises or corporate, enterprises basically. So yeah, basically I wanted to ask about that. Like, if you foresee at some point an integration of this kind of information that you can generate with models and with different scenarios to a more broad application to, yeah, that's my question basically.
Yeah, no, I will answer it in layers. No, so first, no, that the CAEA, and then especially the specifically the extent condition accounts, they have been adopted as a national standard, no, by I think all the members of the UN statistics, no. So I don't know if that's 190 countries or something. So that already provides, right, a global standard that can help. Then there is at the corporate level different standards. For example, you have the British Standard on Natural Capital Accounting for Businesses and Organizations, which, if you look at it, does of course build on the CAEA. Specifically now, when you think about ecosystem extent and condition, the ISO is currently developing a standard. So let's see in how far that links as well. But then also, for example, TNFD, where IUCN's chief economist has been working on this, they will also have an interest in using extent and condition account for businesses. So that is because you have this global standard, it can help standardize other work. In addition, we as IUCN, we participate in a project called Circhive, where actually what we are then trying to do is look at how you can strengthen corporate natural capital accounting by linking it with the CAEA. And that is specifically for the extent and condition accounts. Afterwards, it becomes very different, no? Because when you look at national accounts for ecosystem services, you think about the provision to industry, government, households, etc. Whereas as a business, you are then mainly interested in the dependencies you have on specific ecosystem services, and then also how you're impacting ecosystems. And so that's where then there is a difference. No, but there is a lot of work going on in exactly standardizing that. And it can build on existing work. No, there is, for example, the Natural Capital Protocol, very strong on impact and dependencies. But because it is working with businesses, they were less strong on I would say the spatial aspect of it. No, but of course, if as a business you really depend on natural capital, then and you really want to understand it, then at some point you do have to look at specific areas. There is tools that are not geographically specific. The Encore tool, for example, can help you to understand your dependencies and impacts, but it's very broad. It will not tell you, specific dependencies and specific impacts, and also how they relate. No, for example, it's okay as a business if you depend, for example, on the provision of water and the amount of water that you're using. But of course, then it's also relevant to think how much water there is, not just how much you're using. So that is definitely going on. And I think that there is still, a lot of work needed. No, but the fact that the CAEA is this global standard can help us actually in using that always as a reference framework. I hope that answers your question. Yep.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you so much, Camila. I really like every time we organize a webinar, it looks like at the end, it's like everyone's like, oh, we are finishing the webinar. I really want to pose my question. So thank you so much for all of you. It's never too late, as I say. I see one colleague posted a question in the chat, but I saw another colleague raise their hand. Faisa, are you still with us? Please, you can speak.
Yes, thank you, Veronica, and also thank you for Linda. And thank you for this presentation. And this is, for me, it's a new approach. I think that's we can apply it but I think that there is maybe in our context, I'm thinking about our context here in our region, as we are talking about in West Asia region. I think that's maybe there are many challenges to adopt such approach for natural capital accounting. And yes, it's good and it's give you more information or reliable information and transparency to let's say deliver any information or any data about any value of the ecosystem that we are digging more about it. But I think when we like to adopt such approach like this, I think that we have to focus more about how to make it, how to make this approach accessible for those who are working in decision making, as they are the main player who are let's say can mainstream it to many sectors, as we are talking about the ecosystem as a whole. So we are talking about water, the green areas, the trees, forests, and so on. So we are talking about as we are talking about the biggest picture. So we can just to take more something like awareness and to make it applicable to have their action to adopt such approach to be applied for each intervention or for each project, or to make it, let's say, mainstream in the policy and strategy in each country. So I think when we reach this point, we can improve the data collection, we can improve the integration of this system as our modeling that's they talk about it. So I think that's I think it's very important thing that we can adopt, but we can approach it from many angles, that we can do it accessible, available for all of who can decide something for strategy or program or whatever. This is my point, and thank you so much for your fruitful presentation. And I think I have to dig more about this, and I like to give me more information in the future about this and how to apply it in our upcoming projects in the future. So thank you so much for this presentation and this new topic for me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So then just a quick, addition to this. No, so the most of the work that I presented was based on Invest, which is open source software. Of course, you do need specific capacities and internet, etc. But it's directly accessible. You can go to the website, which, if needed, we can share afterwards together with the presentation. No? You can download it. Then another software that is often used is Arias, which is artificial intelligence for, and it can also help you with modeling ecosystem services. There is also even a model called Arias for SEA. So I'm not a specialist in using Arias, but you have some colleagues that are. But it's very useful then to model or to measure a specific ecosystem extent condition. Of course, with then stronger in some countries than in others, because it is based on the information that is out there. But that can potentially already help. You will quickly probably also see whether there is an error in the results that you have. But especially Arias for SEA is relatively straightforward to use. What is interesting about Invest is that we can easily model these different scenarios. You can potentially also do that in Arias, but that I am not certain about. But so both have easily accessible online courses that can help you train as well. And then if there is an interest in SEA-EA, so the natural capital accounting approach, then there is a open access course available, developed by the UN on that one as well. Then, of course, to go from this national system to this more local system, right? That's really ongoing work. So the work that I presented that was done by Juha Sikamaki, Matthias Piaggio, and Guillermo Putzes, they were the first then to really test this, and really say, okay, let's now use SEA-EA to measure the outcomes of NBS. But there more work will be needed. And then I think there was a last question, maybe.
Yes, it was a last question, and I have to say thanks a lot, Faisa, for your point on pilot testing. I think we will have Leander sometime soon again.
Inshallah. Thank you.
Yeah,
That's great, and I appreciate also your interest to do that. So I'm so interested for this topic, really. So I appreciate it, really appreciate it for Linda and also for you, Veronica, for doing some such webinars and events such like this. Thank you so much.
No, you're welcome here. Like we are happy. People join the NAbSA family. This is a community. It's an open community, and what we want is to have more and more people on board. And I do think, like Leander, we will have him soon as part of the NAbSA activities because it sounds super relevant to really apply this concept into within the context of NAbSA. Of course, when we talk about NAbSA, we talk about the paneling for climate community. So there is definitely room for this. But I will leave some details by the end of the session. I won't say anything like the final surprise. And I would like to, yes, indeed, is the last question. And I really appreciate that Sareme, she's the one asking this question because maybe Sareme, if you would like to speak, I also think you are allowed to speak within Zoom. If not, as I say, I'm very happy that Sareme is addressing this question because she's working on the Farm Radio project, working across 14 countries in sub-Saharan Africa with small farmers, and she and the whole team behind, and all the small farmers organization and other organizations are doing into really influencing policy when it comes to the agricultural sector. So her question is similar to what I asked you, Leander, in terms of any case studies in on the use of this concept of natural capital accounting and the modelization behind in influencing public policies. You mentioned about the willingness of countries, of course, but what about the private sector? Is there anything you would like to share with us?
Yeah, no, I mean, so I would say for the natural capital, no, as I mentioned, no, there is existing natural capital protocol specifically for private sector. No, they have quite a lot of case studies on their approach. Then, yeah, there is work going on the use of CAEA for businesses. And then there is, like some attempts at even having standards, no, such as the British standard and then the ISO work, etc. No, so yeah, corporate natural capital accounting is definitely there, and it also links now with the task force nature-related financial disclosure, no, so the TNFD, because of course, in order to understand your dependencies, yeah, you need to look at natural capital. So that's the first thing. Then related to the use of Invest. So I would have to look. I can imagine that it has been applied. Then specifically for ARIA, so we are working with some companies to actually test in how far it can help them with developing their extent and condition accounts. But that work is not published yet. It's part of the Circhive project. But that's definitely a question that we are trying to answer. And then also, of course, is the level of detail sufficient for like a company if they want to measure it at a specific specific area, a specific farm, or for a broad range of farms. But so we haven't answered that one yet. But you can definitely use it, no? And then of course, yeah, the question would be like, for which area, no? Would you use it? But I can have a quick look at the website of the Natural Capital Project, see if there is any specific case studies there that have been published with the private sector. But the tool can definitely be used by a specific company. If it sources from one area, if it sources from different areas, the modeling is a bit more complex, but it's not impossible.
Thanks, Leander. Sareme, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I think Leander responded to your question, but please, you can put any comment of if you would like to have more detailed information. We are happy also to share with you. We are reaching almost the end of the session today. Again, very grateful to have you on board, Leander, and definitely you have reached a lot of interest in the audience. Not only in the audience, because we have the chance that other colleagues have previously contacted us in like, we really want to know more about ecosystem services. Could we have more information? Could we have another more dedicated session? So that's what I say, like Leander is here with us today, but you will see, if he agrees, you will see him again as part of NAbSA. But thank you so much, Leander. Now, I would like to, if you can go next, please, Rose. The sessions, this was an opportunity to share on some of the actions that are happening with NAbSA. But there are so many other opportunities. The Wednesdays of Science, it was only 3 days, but there will be much more coming. But also coming is not coming anymore. Now is real. We have the NAbSA website. Some of you were all already aware, where you can find information about all the projects that are part of the Partnering for Climate community, but also other resources beyond our community of practice. And something that we would like to share with you is that we are in the process of developing the NAbSA integrated operational framework. We have an open consultation right now, so all of you are more than welcome to provide feedback. Please just contact us in our NAbSA email, nabsa@iucn.org. And you will reach the whole NAbSA team in case you are interested in being part of this co-creation process that we hope to have the tool ready by our Congress, IUCN World Conservation Congress happening in October. Next, please. So this is some of the opportunities that we can have in being part of NAbSA. But of course, as I said, you can always get in touch with us. This is the email that I wanted to share. To don't mistake and you end up sending the email to someone else. So please reach us out. As always, as part of NAbSA, we are very open to any opportunity. If you have any topic you would like to dig in more, you would like to have more information, we are always planning new sessions to respond to the demand to the Partnering for Climate community. So please just bear this in mind. And with this, I would really like also to share with you some of the news with regard to the NAbSA operational framework. Allow me to, I hope you can hear. If not, we will share with you this video. We have come up with a little video for closing today and to really foster your interest in being part of the development of the NAbSA operational framework. So thank you so much to all of you, and we leave you with our small NAbSA video. Can you hear? I knew this will happen. We will post the video. We will try to send. We will send to all of you by email, so then you can also check it later on in your own computers. But with this, again, thank you so much to all of you for joining today. Stay tuned, because we will get in touch with all of you, and of course, get in touch with us anytime. Thank you, and see you next.
Thank you. Bye.